BARK Radio.
What's good, everybody? It's Robo from All Bark back with another video, and today I'm bringing you my Week 1 college football picks. We are finally back kicking off the 2025 season, and I've done countless hours of research and film study going over rosters and depth charts, trying to evaluate every team to my best ability. I also have some pick stuff planned for the NFL season this year, so stay tuned for that as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the Week 0 recap. The first two seasons of weekly picks on this channel have gone really well. I picked pretty much every game on the slate, both straight up and against the spread, and we're firmly in the positive through 2 years. Week 0 wasn't a great start to this year though, only 5 games and some tough breaks, but fading Kansas was definitely a questionable decision on my end. Regardless though, let's go ahead and get into week 1. It's a loaded slate, so if I miss any games, that's because there was no spread available at the time of making this video, so feel free to ask about those ones in the comments. Week 1 kicks off with maybe the Group of 5 game of the year with South Florida hosting Boise State. Boise is a better team this year than last in my opinion, despite losing Ashton Jeanty. They've got a loaded backfield depth-wise and return so much production on both sides of the ball. And then South Florida with Byron Brown back at quarterback is a dangerous team. Top 5 in the Group of 5 to me, and get this Boise matchup at home, which is a big advantage. I do feel like Boise State's a better team in the trenches though, and that's why they can take this game on the road. I expect them to be able to run the football, feeding Gaines and Sherrod, and Maddox Madsen gets going enough to help Boise survive this game by a field goal, 30-27. Ohio won the MAC last year, but seems very weak in the trenches this season after losing so much. So despite returning Parker Navarro and bringing back Sia Bangura through a portal, I think Rutgers is a really tough matchup in week 1 and should completely control this game if they're up to it. I'm not an Ethan Kaliakmanis guy by any means, but his experience should pay dividends in this game, helping balance that offense out more. And the Rutgers defense looks improved enough to get more than enough pressures on Navarro to win this game by 2 scores or more to me. I'm going to take Rutgers to start the season off right, 34-17. Next is Bowling Green and Lafayette. It's Eddie George's debut as head coach of the Falcons, and while I'm not a fan of this Bowling Green team compared to in years past, they've got some real talent at the skill position still and a solid defense. Lafayette is not looking like a very talented opponent after losing a lot, so 2 scores isn't much juice to lay for me when I feel pretty confident the Falcons can score at least 30 points in this game and control the game defensively. I'd expect George to really want to establish his way early, so give me Bowling Green here, 33-14. We've got a bowl game rematch from last season with East Carolina heading to NC State. The Wolfpack lost that game in shocking fashion, but returned a ton and looked like a better team than the one who showed up in that game. Whereas I can't really say the same for ECU, honestly, after losing some big stars on that roster. I think NC State can simply outmatch ECU in the trenches and take advantage of a really poor defense early on. Give me CJ Bailey to have a big day and start the season way different than they did a year ago, getting a revenge on the Pirates with a 3-score win, 38-20. Jacksonville State was a great story in the past few seasons with Rich Rod leading the program to the top of the Conference USA, but this team got absolutely shredded by the portal after losing Rich Rod to West Virginia, and starting quarterback Gavin Wimsatt has not been reliable at all throughout his career. Luckily for them, UCF is one of the bottom 5 Power 5 teams this year and has a lot of new guys around the starting lineup with pretty minimal experience. I feel like this could be a game they start pretty slow in and gradually improve throughout because of how clear the talent gap is. But it's obviously hard to tell what will happen here with new coaching staffs and everything. I just personally can't lay 3 scores here for UCF, so I'll take Jacksonville State to cover, but UCF wins it, 31-17. We'll get our first look at a brand new FBS team in the Conference USA Thursday night with Delaware taking on Delaware State, who is severely outmatched here in my opinion after an abysmal 2024 season. But they have a new look this year with a lot of new names and a new head coach and former NFL star Deshaun Jackson. I don't really love this Delaware team, honestly, although they aren't as bad as Kennesaw State was coming into the FBS by any means. This matchup is not one I'd touch personally, as there's way too much unknown to me, but I think Zach Marker is a fine QB1, and the run game should have a huge week here with Jonathan Silver leading the way. And I think Delaware starts their FBS tenure out with a blowout win. I'll go with a 38-13 final. On to another FBS-FCS matchup. Louisiana Monroe hosts St. Francis with a pretty big spread, considering I graded ULM a bottom 20 team in the country this season. But honestly, I really do like Bryant Vincent as a coach, and he seems to find gems pretty consistently throughout his roster, just like Ahmad Hardy last year, who's now at Missouri. My main concern is Aiden Armenta at quarterback. I wasn't impressed at all with his play a season ago with a 9-touchdown, 10-pick ratio. However, I think the defense will be a strong point, so this won't be a favorite play of mine, but St. Francis scoring once or twice makes this an easier line to cover, as I just don't trust ULM to be able to run up the score. I'm going to go with a 31-14 final for the Warhawks. Akron starts the year hosting Wyoming, who not only do I think is a better team, but has much more reason to win this game as Akron's ineligible for any postseason play this year due to academic issues. A lack of motivation for the Zips is definitely something to monitor for me, and as I said, I think Wyoming is considerably better this year. The offensive line looks pretty solid for the Mountain West, which could help them run all over Akron despite losing Harris and Whaley. And I honestly expect their defensive line to just wear down Akron's offense. I don't mind laying anything under 7 points on the road at all with these factors at play, especially with some weather issues. So give me Wyoming here, 28-17. Missouri Central Arkansas is a game to watch for one reason and one reason only: the quarterback battle between Bo Pribula and Sam Horn. Any QB battle that makes its way onto week one makes it tough to take a team covering a huge spread because of some of the inconsistency on the offense. And this game is no different, sitting up over 5 touchdowns at 36.5 right now. I definitely think Missouri dominates, especially defensively, but Central Arkansas is not a terrible FCS program and can definitely create some stops with that inconsistent quarterback play for Missouri, leading to a closer cover. I'll go 41-7 Mizzou for a final. Duke starts the year against Elon again after a near scare 2 years ago in the same spot, but I really like this Duke team this year. They brought in Darian Mensah at quarterback, who could be great, and they've got some absolute studs on the O-line and in the secondary, but there could be enough new faces week one that could warrant a bit of a slower start and make a 5-touchdown spread a tough cover. With that said, I don't think this Elon team can match up with Duke whatsoever, and the amount of talent on this defense can suffocate Elon enough to get the job done. So I do like Duke big, 45-6. Oklahoma State had a disastrous 2024 season after some higher hopes centered around Ollie Gordon, and starts 2025 off with a matchup against a pretty solid FCS program in UT Martin. And while they seem to be switching up the offense again to more of an air raid, I just can't get to laying more than 3 touchdowns on the Cowboys right now. Haas Haney is a complete unknown at quarterback, and Zane Flores will also play, so there is some inconsistency and a bunch of other question marks around the team as a whole. I don't trust the defense much at all either, so it wouldn't shock me to see UT Martin stay in this game pretty deep, but I think Oklahoma State does pull away at some point. I'll go 38-21. I'm pretty excited for Minnesota-Buffalo. Minnesota is a true sleeper in the Big Ten this year with an elite running back room and great play in the trenches, and Buffalo looks like a very competitive team in the MAC this year with a great linebacker room leading that defense. It'll be our first look at Minnesota quarterback Drake Lindsey, who they're really high on over there, but until we see the ability on the field, it's tough to think too much of him. I definitely think Buffalo's returning production, especially with their run game and front seven, can keep this game respectable. But as I said, Minnesota's a team I'm pretty high on this year because of the trenches and that running game. I think they pull away late and take it by about 3 scores. I've got the Gophers 34-14. Houston has a new look offense this season with incoming transfers Connor Wegman and Tanner Koziol looking like a strong duo in the Big 12. But the rest of the roster still has more than enough question marks around it to start the season to think they could struggle, especially considering Stephen F. Austin is not a lousy matchup at all, being a ranked FCS team with some studs on their roster. My early thoughts on Houston are worries with the pass rush and secondary after losing A.J. Halsey to LSU, and I'm not real high on the offensive line being able to protect Wegman enough in conference play either, which is why I think Stephen F. Austin does have a chance to cover here, but I'm going to take Houston outright, 34-17. Nebraska-Cincinnati from Arrowhead could be one of the best games in the week, honestly, with a fun matchup between 2 solid quarterbacks. I like Brendan Sorsby a lot, and Dylan Raiola is someone I really believe in for a year 2 leap this season, but in terms of the talent around both of these guys, I have to believe there's a clear edge to Nebraska initially. Dante Corleone is a stud on the interior D-line and could make life harder for the Huskers, but I feel like Cincy's defense outside of that is pretty lacking, and Nebraska's weapons are just far superior to me. I think we see Dane Key explode here in his Husker debut, and that eventually leads to Nebraska starting 1-0. I'm going with the Huskers, 28-20. Staying in the Big Ten, I am pretty low on Wisconsin this year. I'm just not a fan of Billy Edwards, and I don't think they're as strong defensively as they've been in the past either. With that said, I do really like Dylan Jones at running back, who seems to be the starter there, but Miami Ohio's defense is pretty solid all around, and Daquan Finn coming back to the MAC was a huge addition at quarterback for them. I don't know how well he'll play in week 1, but the former MAC Offensive Player of the Year could make a statement on the road against a weaker Wisconsin team. So I do feel pretty comfortable taking Miami, Ohio to cover in this one, but Wisconsin should pull this one out, 27-17. Back over to another FBS-FCS matchup, San Diego State hosts FCS-ranked Stony Brook. I honestly love the under in this game. San Diego State looks like a defensive-minded team again this season, with a pretty strong front seven and an offense with quite a few question marks. Jaden Denegal comes over from Michigan getting his first real PT at quarterback, and the offense around him isn't the greatest. And Stony Brook definitely can be a little competitive here. I don't expect the Aztecs to just run all over them, scoring 40 plus with ease, so give me a bit of a lower scoring game that allows a Stony Brook cover, 30-14. Another solid FBS FCS matchup is next with Tarleton State heading out to Army. Tarleton State is a quality FCS team who just beat Portland State 42-0 last week in dominant fashion, and now heads to an Army team that just looks completely different than last year. The defense could still be good, but it isn't looking the same at all, and I'd expect a drop-off offensively early with Bryson Daly and the O-line gone. I'm not super high on Dwayne Coleman at quarterback either, but we haven't seen much from him, so you never know. But I definitely feel like Tarleton can stay in this game for quite a while. I'll take Army, but by just a touchdown here in Week 1, 27-20. Michigan State needs a statement year 2 this season. The schedule isn't super friendly, but there's a path to 6 or 7 wins for sure. They start Week 1 hosting Western Michigan. Western has some playmakers on their roster, but a ton of holes in the defense, and I could see MSU's offense letting them up this game with that loaded receiving room. Aiden Childs needs to focus on keeping the ball in their own hands and limiting turnovers. If he does so, MSU should win this one by about 3 scores pretty easily. Even though I really question MSU's defense, I just don't think Western has enough talent to finish drives with 7s and stay competitive to the end. Give me the Spartans, 35-16. Next is another tough one with Wake Forest hosting Kennesaw State. Wake is pretty clearly the more talented team by a wide margin and should be able to run the ball with a lot of success yet again. But this could be the year of a Kennesaw State breakout in the Conference USA. The defense looks decent, and they finally got development to the skill positions, which can be a big help to their offense moving the ball this year. If anything, I like the under in this game because I think Wake's got so much new on offense, and I'm not a Robbie Ashford guy at all. And although Kennesaw's offense should be better, it still should struggle against a Power 5 front. So I'll take Wake by 2 scores here, 31-17. We've got a semi-neutral site game with App State and Charlotte facing off from Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. So a hometown game for the 49ers, but not in their home stadium. Nonetheless, I can see that giving them a slight advantage still in the matchup, and I think they've got a genuine shot. App State may have a small talent edge, but Charlotte does have some potential this season. Connor Harrell comes over from North Carolina to be the starting quarterback, and I think the 49er defense could be pretty solid in the American this year. As for App State, they lost quite a bit of production, and the offense does not look too promising to me. I think they start slow, and Charlotte pulls off a close upset as 7-point dogs, 27-24. Illinois is looking to build off of last year's success to an even brighter 2025, with Altmaier back at the helm and a ton of trench talent back in the fold. And they'll start the season off hosting Western Illinois, who they should absolutely demolish. The spread is way up in the high 40s, so it comes down to if they can score enough. And while I do think they can, I think we see backups for a large chunk of the second half, which can slow down their ability to put up points. Even just one score from Western Illinois could be enough to cover a spread that high. We'll also see if Altmaier comes out slinging it with a new receiver room after Bryant and Franklin left. But I do like the talent they added in with Clement and Bowick. I'm going to go with a 49-7 final for the Illini, just missing out on that cover. Friday night's best game, in my opinion, is Auburn at Baylor. The public's pretty split in this matchup, with the spread sitting at just 2.5 in favor of the Tigers. From a talent perspective, I can see why Auburn is the favorite. They've got the better defense, especially on that D-line, and one of the better O-line units in the SEC, which means they can just out-physical Baylor. But I'm really worried about Jackson Arnold's ability to lead this team at quarterback, even with the weapons at his disposal. There doesn't seem to be much confidence in him, and he had some serious growing pains last year. Those concerns are not shared at all on the Baylor side. Sawyer Robertson was a stud last year, and the running game was great. I expect more of the same from Baylor this season with an improved defense. With less questions heading into Week 1, I favor the more consistent offense playing at home as well. I'm rolling with Baylor here to pull out a close one, 31-27. On to another potentially great game. Georgia Tech heads out to Colorado to take on the new-look Buffs without Travis and Shedeur. But honestly, I don't really get this spread much. I usually believe in Deion and had a lot of success siding with him in past years. But I really love this Georgia Tech team. The offense should be phenomenal with King, Haynes, and Rutherford back, and the addition of Eric Rivers. And I don't feel that way towards Colorado this season. There are some NFL-level prospects on the roster, but Caden Salter is just not moving the needle the way that Shedeur did for me. And I still don't think Colorado's defense is good enough to slow down this offense, especially the rushing attack. I think Tech comes into Boulder and takes this one by 2 scores, 38-24. Late night Friday, we've got UNLV and Sam Houston playing each other after making their Week 0 impressions. UNLV was put on upset alert against a very weak Idaho State team who just gashed the Rebel defense, which wasn't super surprising, but I don't think anybody saw 31 points and 550 yards of offense coming. And although the game wasn't close, Sam Houston's offense put together a pretty decent day against a solid Western Kentucky team. Now getting to host this same UNLV defense a week later, I'm a little surprised the spread has only gone down a couple points. I definitely think Sam Houston can cover here. A week ago, I would not think this would be very close, but you don't just fix a defense that bad in 1 week. I think UNLV has to escape another close call here, 34-28. Our final weeknight game is San Jose State hosting Central Michigan, and after scouting Central this offseason, I am very low on the Chippewas this season. I think they've got a ways to go throughout the entire roster to be competitive in the MAC, and San Jose State is my number 4 team in the Mountain West, which is just a much better conference. I think Walker Egan's going to find a new number 1 target this year, and I really could see it being Leland Smith from Purdue if he gets the early PT. He's my biggest sleeper in the conference, but they've also got other weapons and a great back in Floyd Chalk. And while I don't think the Spartans' defense is very good, I just don't know where any offense is going to come from yet for CMU. So I like San Jose State big this week, 35-17. On to Saturday, and since we go in game start order, we'll start with a massive one. Texas at Ohio State. Number 1 at number 3. Arch Manning versus Julian Sayin. Ryan Wingo versus Jeremiah Smith. So many superstars on both rosters here, and while this game is definitely a toss-up, I've had my mind set on who I'm picking for a while now. The amount of returning production Texas brings back compared to the Buckeyes is just way too much for me to love Ohio State in this spot. I just think Arch is an objectively better and more proven quarterback, and the gap between the defenses heading into week 1 is enough for me to believe the Longhorns will travel well and take down the defending champs. There was just way too many losses compared to Texas, especially in the trenches for me. Maybe by the end of the year, it's a different story with these two teams, but I think the Horns are the better team right now, and I think they win this one on the road, 24-20. Another exciting game is next with Syracuse and Tennessee from Atlanta, Georgia, with Tennessee entering as 2 touchdown favorites. I've gone back and forth a bit in this game as I'm really not too high on Tennessee's offense this season, but I think their defense has a chance to be phenomenal, and they do return some solid pieces on the O-line. And with Syracuse, they just lost so much production, and we don't really know what we're going to get out of Steve Angeli yet. I trust Fran Brown and his guys to show up and compete. I just don't know how often they'll be able to score. And I think the Q secondary could really struggle, which could really affect this game considering how well Tennessee usually runs the football. I think the Vols dominate defensively and take this one with ease, 31-14. Southern Miss was one of this year's offseason winners after hiring 2024 Sun Belt champion Marshall's head coach Charles Huff and taking half the team away in the portal, quickly shifting from a bottom feeder of the conference to a potential threat towards the top. I think it's more likely in year 1 that they're in the middle of the conference, but regardless, they're one of the most improved teams in the country and get a test at week 1 at home against Mississippi State, who a season ago lost to Toledo at home. I expect more out of the Bulldogs this season, but it's still not a competitive team for the SEC. However, in my mind, that talent gap is still very wide. I'd be a little surprised if they struggled late into the fourth quarter here. Give me the Bulldogs to pull away, 37-21. Maryland and FAU is a game I've seen quite a few people considering a potential upset pick, and I do get why, with Maryland looking like a bottom 2 or 3 team in the Big Ten with an inexperienced quarterback, and FAU getting a little buzz in the American this year after adding Caden Veltkamp and Easton Messer into the portal from Western Kentucky. But my assessment of FAU this year has question marks all over the defense. I think this is a team we see involved in shootouts all year long, honestly, unless some things get figured out over there. Maryland's got enough talent on their O-line to push FAU around a bit and create some big plays in the run game and take some pressure off of Justin Martin in his first start. And I just think defensively, they've got enough to avoid FAU being able to have their way themselves. I think Maryland wins this game by 3 scores, 38-20. Staying in the Big Ten, we move to another squad predicted to finish at the bottom of the conference with Purdue. They'll host Ball State Week 1 with new head coach Barry Odom bringing in an entirely new roster through the portal. He'll look to reshape the program this season little by little, fighting through a gauntlet schedule after the first 2 weeks. But honestly, even this game poses its challenges for them. Ball State is not a good MAC team, but they've got some play extenders and a pretty solid offensive line now that it's finally healthy this season. If Purdue plays a sloppy, inconsistent game, which is so common with new teams, Ball State can hang around, and I think Purdue has to settle for a closer win here. I'm going to go 30-17 Boilermakers. One more Big Ten squad is in the noon slate with Northwestern as road underdogs at Tulane. I do understand this line. Tulane looks really legit in the group of 5 again, especially on the offensive and defensive lines, but Northwestern to me is a little bit underrated heading into this season. I don't think they're nearly as bad as Maryland and Purdue are right now, and I think their defense can more than compete with Tulane in this game. Preston Stone should be a massive upgrade this season as well and give that offense a much-needed boost, especially considering they return both Cam Porter and Joseph Hyman in the backfield, and they have a decent offensive line to complement it. I think Northwestern could put it together enough offensively to steal this game on the road from Tulane as underdogs, 27-23. Kent State went winless in 2024, including a loss to an FCS team, which made that a total of 1 win in the past 2 seasons combined. And this season, they're yet again projected for another abysmal year, as you can probably tell from the spread of this game being at just a touchdown. Merrimack is not a premier FCS team by any means. Kent State is just that bad. And I genuinely wouldn't be surprised at all for history to repeat itself and they lose to an FCS team yet again. Even the computers barely have them above Merrimack in talent level, so for the sake of not going winless and snapping a massive streak, I think this game screams late heroics from Kent State. I've got them surviving this one, 30-28. Toledo took down an SEC team on the road last year in Mississippi State and will have a chance to do it again this week at Kentucky, who entered the season as my second to last place team in the SEC and pretty far down the talent chart. I still think there's a gap between the two rosters and programs, but Toledo does bring back a good amount of experience that has played together, and they've got maybe the best secondary in the entire group of five in my opinion. Those two factors could be a recipe for an upset considering how little Kentucky returns on both sides of the ball, and not much coming in to replace it. I'm not a Zach Calzada believer either, so I definitely see this being a close game if Toledo comes to play. I'll take the Cats to Survivor by a field goal though, 27-24. Indiana was a shock of the 2024 college football season to many, and even myself, despite being much higher on them than others. I saw the ceiling as 9 or 10 wins, and they managed a playoff appearance out of it. And this year, the roster might be even better with Mendoza at quarterback and some studs returning on both sides of the ball. With that said, Old Dominion looks really competitive in the Sun Belt this season after bringing back a lot of talent, especially in their front seven. And I think Colton Joseph could be one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. I don't really see them getting obliterated in this game. Indiana should win fairly comfortably, but I think Old Dominion can definitely play. I'm going to take a backdoor cover, 38-17 final. Louisville kicks off the season hosting Eastern Kentucky, a team I honestly think can run all over. And that's really the key to this game. With the spread all the way up around 40, how long do the starters play and how quickly does Louisville score? I think we see a heavy dose of the run game with Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, and enough passes to get Miller Moss comfortable with his weapons early. But with Louisville replacing so much defensively, I wouldn't rule out Eastern Kentucky finding a way to score a couple times. I'm leaning towards EKU covering close, but I prefer to stay away from this game, honestly. I'm going to go with a 45-10 final. The 3:30 slate starts with number 2 Penn State opening against Nevada, and not the same Nevada team last year with Brendan Lewis. This Nevada team looks like one of the bottom 5 or 10 teams in the FBS. This should be an absolute cakewalk for Penn State, who looks like a real national title contender this season, bringing back all of Aller, Singleton, and Allen, as well as a loaded receiver group they got through the portal. Not to mention likely a top 10 defense in the nation on the other side of the ball. I expect this Penn State team to dominate, even with their backups, and maybe get close to that over by themselves. I'm rolling with a 52-3 final in this one. Georgia and Marshall is a tough one to evaluate. In the Kirby Smart era, Georgia as a near 40-point favorite has not covered once, as he usually takes his foot off the gas and milks the clock. But this could be a bit of an exception. This Georgia team may come in fired up after the way last season ended, and this Marshall team is absolutely gutted after they let Coach Huff go. Honestly, I have the herd ranked much lower than most computer systems do, and I feel like 39.5 might be doing a bit more justice to Marshall than this team may deserve. Time will tell as maybe the entirely new team performs well together, but I really think this is a matchup of a top 10 team and a bottom 10 one, and I don't mind siding with Georgia to snap that ATS statistic. Give me the Dogs, 49-7. Alabama at Florida State should be a fun one for a few reasons. We get our first real look at Ty Simpson and a brand new Alabama backfield after the Jam Miller injury, and a look at Thomas Castellanos after a down year at Boston College last season, and a lot of trash talk hyping himself up for this game. And looking at Alabama's defense, I don't think that was the way to go, as I'd be shocked if he has a great game here. Even in Tallahassee, I'm expecting Bama to travel and travel well. They've got too much talent and production on that offensive line and throughout that defense to not be able to control this game. Not to mention the weapons at Ty's disposal with Williams, Bernard, and Horton. I like the Tide in this one big, 34-13. Iowa State genuinely did not look great week 0 and still managed a strong enough second half to knock off Kansas State. Maybe some poor coaching and decisions and quarterback play had a say in that outcome, but you have to give it to the Cyclones. The offensive line improved throughout that game after a disastrous start, and Rocco Beck made a couple great throws to strike quick. This week, they've got to face one of the best programs in the FCS with South Dakota. Many people may put them on upset alert here, which is certainly possible, but I think getting the wheels loose in week 0 will have a positive impact on how they play in this one. And we see Iowa State pull away in the second half here to cover, 37-17. Temple at UMass is a really ugly week 1 FBS matchup. Two teams many have in the bottom 10 of the country going head-to-head. Temple looking slightly improved from a year ago, though, at least compared to UMass, who joins the MAC this year and is instantly one of the worst teams in the conference, besides, of course, Kent State. Just bearing surprises, I really don't see any success out of UMass this season. I think Temple's got a slight advantage across the board here, besides the running back room. And even then, I think Jay Ducker could be great for the Owls this season. So I think Temple gets it done on the road in week 1 by a touchdown, 31-24. Oregon's got a new look offense for 2025 with Dante Moore replacing Dylan Gabriel and Tulane transfer Mekhi Hughes taking the reins of starting running back. And they'll kick off the year hosting FCS powerhouse Montana State. And while Montana State still has pieces to dominate in the FCS, I just don't think they're the same team at all. They lost a 3-year starter quarterback in Tommy Mellott and a lot of talent to the FBS through the portal. Oregon is a top 10 team in the country on paper and shouldn't have any issues in this game. Sure, the receiver room could have some questions with Stewart out, but this offensive line should dominate this game, and Oregon's defense has some ballers who can constantly force stops. 4 scores isn't too much for me to lay here. I like the Ducks big, 45-10. Liberty's got a new look in 2025 with Salter heading to Colorado. They brought in Ethan Vasco to take the reins, but it doesn't look like he's won the job yet over Ryan Berger. Regardless of who starts, I definitely see the offense taking a step back this season, but still being able to perform in their conference. And the defense is still going to be very solid. Maine should not be much of a problem for these guys, but with the potential quarterback battle going on and some question marks around that offense with the offseason shuffling, I've seen enough clunkers from Liberty in the past that I don't want to be laying 4 touchdowns without knowing who they are yet. So I'm going to go with a more conservative score here and take Liberty 35-13. I've said it a couple times in preseason videos now, but I am very high on Oklahoma's roster this season, specifically John Mateer at quarterback. I think he can showcase his ability big time in week 1 and run the score up with a lot of big plays before he eventually takes a seat and the backups get in the game. Illinois State is a top 10 FCS team this year, but are not good enough to truly compete with Oklahoma in my eyes. It would take a lot going wrong in this game offensively for Oklahoma to not flirt with covering. I really love the Sooner defense this season, specifically that defensive line, who I fully expect to shut down Illinois State almost completely, which is why I'm going to go with a 45-6 final. Iowa's an interesting team as usual. I wouldn't say I'm very high on them right now, though. The defense lost a ton of production and could obviously take a step back going from one of the nation's best to pretty average in the Big Ten. However, the O-line is great, and Mark Gronowski could be the best passer they've had in years, but his weapons look pretty shaky to me, and it's always an Iowa offense. Until we see it as a trustworthy group, we can have our doubts at how they'll perform. I just don't love a spread up near the 40s when I don't think Albany gets shut out. There's too much variance with the Iowa defense right now to expect a 0 this early, so I'll take Albany covering and a blowout, 41-10 Hawkeyes. This could be a year we see Virginia take a step forward in the ACC. They went out and spent some money in the offseason, picking up some guys from the portal that can make an impact. Chandler Morris comes over from North Texas at quarterback, Jamal Edgerrin from Purdue at receiver, and both Harrison Whaley and Jamari Taylor at running back, forming a 3-headed monster with Xavier Brown. With that said, it's still very likely they remain in the bottom half of the ACC as they had a long ways to go, but I definitely think they can beat Coastal Carolina this week by double digits. Coastal's defense looks pretty rough to me, and I think the offense downgraded a bit as well. I don't think Virginia struggles too much in this game. I'm going to go 37-20 Cavs. I'm excited for James Madison this year. Although it sounds Alonzo Barnett may miss the entire season with injury, they reloaded and brought in Matthew Sluka from UNLV, and the running back room is absolutely incredible. The O-line should be a really good group again, and the defense looks rock solid, especially compared to the Sun Belt. Weber State is not a team I'd expect to compete here in this game at all. They've had a tough schedule in the FCS, but I'd take James Madison by multiple scores over most of the group of 5. So I have no issues laying 4 scores here. I'm taking the Dukes big, 42-13. Kansas State needs to come out week 2 fired up and hungry to put week 0's loss behind them. Constant mistakes with penalties and coaching decisions cost them a game they definitely could have won. Dylan Edwards is going to remain out for this week's matchup with North Dakota, but this is not a game that should matter in. If Kansas State isn't in full control of this game, they've got a lot of issues to work out. I don't think North Dakota has anyone who can stop Jace Brown and Avery Johnson, honestly. And Kansas State's front 7 was very good in the first half of last week's game. They should be able to replicate that dominance for all 4 quarters of this one and pick up a blowout win in their home opener, 45-10. Texas A&M genuinely has a chance to be an elite team in college football this season. It really comes down to Marcel Reed's performance through the SEC schedule for me. The Aggies have a great defense with Will Lee as a lockdown corner. Torian York is one of the better linebackers in the country, and a D-line with some star pass rushers. Offensively, the O-line is a massive strength, and they've got 3 stud running backs returning. UTSA is going to be a very tough team to beat in the group of 5, but I don't see them coming too close to A&M in this one, honestly. The talent gap is just too severe, and I think it would take a few turnovers and breakdowns to keep the Roadrunners in this game. I think A&M starts the 2025 season with a bang, taking down UTSA 41-13. Vanderbilt's a tough team to cap, as last year was proof dropping a home game to Georgia State, but beating Alabama. As an offense, Vandy is very run-heavy and slowly operated. They play to Diego Pavia's strengths and will probably wear Charleston down all game, which makes a spread up near 40 points pretty tough to attain unless you're scoring on absolutely every drive. and I just don't know if I trust Vandy yet to have that type of consistency, even against a weaker FCS opponent. As I mentioned, see last year's non-conference results, but they should definitely manhandle this game in the trenches and run some backups into the second half. I'm just not going to get into that 40-point spread. I've got a 41-10 final. Arkansas State returns a three-headed monster on offense of Jalen Rayner, Corey Rucker, and Jaquez Cross, making them one of the best offenses in the Sun Belt this season. The defense is another story, though. It's been rough for a while and doesn't look good again this year, but I don't see the way Southeast Missouri can really keep up with this offense in a shootout if it comes down to it. The offensive firepower is just much stronger with the Red Wolves. Corey Rucker is one of the best receiving threats that many people don't know about yet, and I'd expect him to really take over this game. Give me Arkansas State by double digits in a higher scoring game than they'd probably like. 38-24. Nicholls just shocked top 5 ranked Incarnate Word last week, 20-6 in the FCS. Nobody really saw it coming, as Nicholls isn't really seen as a good FCS team by any means, but pulling that off definitely opens up some eyes. Troy is a bit of a different level of talent, though. After a really rough season in 2024, they finished strong, taking 3 of their final 4, and brought back quite a bit of production while adding some Power 5 guys in Trey Cooley, Ra Thomas, and Elijah Davis to help bulk up that roster talent a bit. I still don't like their chances much in the Sun Belt, but this team should be improved, and while I'm not sure they can decimate Nicholls, especially hearing Ra Thomas is a little banged up, I don't see them dropping this game at all. I'll take Troy by 2 scores, 30-14. Now on to the Saturday night slate, the second biggest game of the week in LSU at Clemson. A battle of 2 top 10 teams with national title aspirations and Heisman candidates at quarterback in week 1. So much of the public is split on this game, and I get why, with Nussmeier being such a strong quarterback prospect and having some incredible weapons at his disposal. And Clemson's kind of struggled in big games like this in the past. See Georgia last year. But I think this Clemson team is just different. They've got a top 3 defense in the country, in my opinion, with freaks on the line in TJ Parker and Peter Woods, and a true shutdown corner in Avion Terrell. And one of the best receiving rooms in America for Cade Klubnik to throw to this season. I think he takes another step forward this year and catapults Clemson to a genuine title threat, and it starts this week with a 31-24 win over LSU. Michigan opens the season with a warm-up game against New Mexico, as they'll have to prepare for Oklahoma in week 2 with the true freshman phenom in Bryce Underwood, who was recently named the starter. I think it was obvious it was his job, and regardless of any ups and downs, Michigan fans are super excited for his future controlling the offense. They've got a great crop of running backs next to him and an improved receiving room with Donovan McCulley coming in from Indiana. The offensive line returns several starters, and Michigan should again have a top 5 or so defense in the nation to help keep them in bigger games if Bryce goes through some freshman struggles. Here in Game 1, I don't expect Michigan to unload the clip offensively, and with maybe a late New Mexico score against backups to nail the cover, I'm going to go with a 41-10 final. USC starts the year at home, taking on a brand new team to the FBS in Missouri State, who brings back the majority of their offensive production from a year ago, where they went 8-4 and came close to knocking off Ball State. With USC, I really think this could be a great year for them. I'm a believer in Jade Mayava at quarterback, and his receiver room is really great with Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. Both running back transfers, Wayman Jordan and Eli Sanders, have some real juice, and the defense should be a better unit with Kamari Ramsey leading the way in the secondary, and a defensive line that I'm really high on. I think USC comes into week 1 ready to go and just takes it to Missouri State, welcoming them to the FBS with a 49-10 blowout. Louisiana Tech hosts Southeast Louisiana this week with a pretty low spread considering where some people have Tech ranked in Conference USA this season. Southeast Louisiana is a decent team in the FCS, but I have to believe that the returning talent in Evan Bullock and Omari Wiggins on the Tech offense can get going early and often in this game. We saw this team compete at times a year ago with Jacksonville State, Western Kentucky, and even Arkansas for a little bit. A 12-point spread is low enough for me to trust them to start the year off right at home. Give me Louisiana Tech to pull away in week 1, 35-14. UTEP just named former 5-star USC and Boise State transfer Malachi Nelson the starting quarterback, which obviously improves the ceiling of this team if he ends up performing, but outside of his loaded receiving core, this UTEP team is just very bad. I don't have much faith in the offensive line or the defense, and Utah State finally looks to have some pieces on their defense and return some solid production that I think can give them a chance to be more competitive in the Mountain West this season. Again, it depends on how they mesh and if Nelson can finally break out for UTEP, but I give Utah State a pretty clear talent edge in this matchup at home. I think they take it, 33-24. Ole Miss has a lot of changes in the starting lineup this season, losing over half their production on both sides of the ball, but a solid portal haul can help them stay afloat in the top half of the SEC this season. Austin Simmons is someone I really like at quarterback, and both Caden Lee and Dejon Stribling are star receivers. Defensively, Suntarini Perkins might be one of the best linebackers in the country, but there's enough production lost for me to think Georgia State can score once or twice. And with a spread up over 5 touchdowns, I don't mind picking Georgia State to cover this game. They're not a good team at all, but were able to upset Vandy last year and have a much better rushing attack this season that could help them compete enough here. I'll go with the Rebels 45-13. BYU had an eventful offseason with the Jake Retzlaff news turning into a portal entry, and recently announced true freshman Bear Bachmeier will be the starting quarterback replacing him. They'll start the year hosting Portland State, who just lost to Tarleton State 42-0 a week ago. To be honest, I am not a fan of BYU this season, and although I like Bachmeier, I expect a lot of growing pains from him. But Tarleton State nearly hitting the spread gives a lot of reason to believe BYU can too. But what gives me a little bit of pause is they typically don't run up the score, and a turnover or two or some misplays here or there could lead to punts dragging the game total down. Just one score by Portland State, and I don't think BYU gets there unless they're just pouring it on. Give me a dominant defensive performance, though, with a 41-3 final. Rice at Louisiana might be a bit of a gift line for me. I could be wrong, but I just think Louisiana is a far superior team this season, especially offensively. Rice losing E.J. Warner and Dean Connors is a big deal to me. We haven't seen any Drew DeVillier really, and a lot of production is gone for them. They rank 110th in offensive returners and 104th overall in the country. Louisiana has even less, but a much stronger quarterback to me in Walker Howard, and a really reliable running back room with Zylan Perry and Bill Davis back. I just don't know how much Rice is going to be able to score early on this season, and I trust the talent Louisiana added in offensively enough. I'm going to go with a 34-17 final for the Ragin' Cajuns. Texas State hosts Eastern Michigan in the opener, and both these teams look completely different this season, ranking in the 120s in returning production. Texas State bringing in more talent through the portal by a pretty significant margin, though. Redshirt freshman Brad Jackson won the starting quarterback job and will get to throw to a pretty strong group of guys in Chris Dawn, Bo Sparks, and Tyron Smith. Eastern Michigan brings in former Michigan State starter and Coastal Carolina backup Noah Kim at quarterback, but promotes a lot of the starting group from within. They do return Terry Lockett, who's a star in the MAC at receiver, though, but I just don't think they match up too well with Texas State, especially going on the road. I'm going with a 38-21 final. North Texas made some defensive improvements through the portal this offseason, which may go a long way down the line in the American, as they've always been a dynamic offense. This year, it'll need redshirt freshman Drew Mestemaker to step up and replace Chandler Morris at quarterback, though, but it'll have some time to grow, as week 1 matchup against Lamar should be an easier one. They return a solid group of linemen and bring in a star receiver in Simeon Evans from Sam Houston, so I think this offense can get figured out fairly quick, and the defense should have a decent week 1. I'll take the Mean Green by 3 scores, 41-20. Tulsa hosts a really solid FCS program in Abilene Christian week 1, but not nearly the same Abilene Christian that almost upset Texas Tech a year ago. Most of that team has gone to the portal, including star quarterback Maverick McIver. A lot of people are pretty low on Tulsa this year, though, and that's understandable. They went 3-9 a year ago and don't look too much improved. But some continuity at quarterback and a couple strong transfers in the running back room make me believe in this offense against weaker teams. A.J. Allen and Dominic Richardson should have big days in this matchup, and I think they just need the defense to not be horrendous to secure a win here. Abilene Christian just isn't the same team. I like Tulsa, 35-24. SMU starts the season late Saturday night against East Texas A&M, opening at 50-point favorites. It's a warranted line, honestly. SMU returns a lot of great production on both sides of the ball. Kevin Jennings is a star, and they've got some maulers on the lines. I love Isaiah Nwokobia in that secondary, and I think SMU can get right back to fighting for an ACC title berth, but 50 points might be a little high to lay. I personally would not touch this game at all, but for the sake of making a pick, I feel like I have to go with East Texas A&M to cover. SMU's got to get up into the 60s if they don't pitch a shutout, and while that's possible, it would take a ton of quick scores and the backups just crushing it. I'm going to roll with a 49-7 final for the Mustangs to kick off the year. Over to an ugly one, New Mexico State hosts Bryant. I graded New Mexico State as a bottom 5 team in the country for this year in the preseason, so they'll have to show a lot to really change my mind on them. I just don't think they have any juice on either side of the lines, and the secondary could get picked apart all year long. I think the offense has a little potential with Logan Fife, Kadarius Callaway, and Jackson Owens transferring in, but I don't see any reason to think the defense will get many stops this season, and the O-line can really impact how these transfers perform. I think Bryant has a chance to compete enough to cover a 3-touchdown spread. I'm going to go with a 35-17 final. Fresno State looked genuinely terrible in Week 1's loss to Kansas and will have to play a much improved Georgia Southern team in the home opener. A lot of people, including myself, had this Georgia Southern team as one of the top teams in the Sun Belt, and I had this pegged as a potential upset before Week 0 happened, so after only managing 7 points against a Kansas defense I wasn't super high on, I feel even more confident now in this game going Georgia Southern's way. I definitely think it'll be close, as Fresno State could look better after having a week under their belt, but I'm going to trust my evaluation of a stronger Georgia Southern team coming on the road and starting 1-0. I'm taking the Eagles close, 27-23. Arizona State returns arguably the top quarterback wide receiver duo in the nation this season, as well as an elite secondary, which leads many to have them as the clear favorite in the Big 12 this year, and potentially snagging another playoff spot. They'll start the year taking on Northern Arizona, a top 25 FCS team that still should not be any match for the Sun Devils team. There's enough continuity for me to believe they can pick up almost right where they left off last year, even without Scat. I think Leavitt and company kick off the season with a bang, 41-7. Idaho at Washington State is a potentially fun FCS-FBS matchup late Saturday night. Idaho comes in as one of the better teams in the FCS, and Washington State has so much turnover with a brand new head coach at the helm in Jimmy Rogers. They lost John Mateer to Oklahoma, and I'm not really sure what to think of Zevi Eckhoff just yet. He could be a breakout star for sure, but until we see it, it's hard to tell. He doesn't have the greatest talent around him this season compared to what Mateer had in Kyle Williams and Chris Hudson. I just think there's enough turnover to be worried about this team clicking early on in the year, and it might take Eckhoff some time, and Idaho has enough talent to really compete here. So I'll take Washington State to survive a closer one, 34-24. Cal at Oregon State is a complete toss-up for me. I don't know what to expect out of either one of these teams, honestly. I'm not very high on Oregon State outside of Malik Murphy, Anthony Hankerson, and Trent Walker, but Cal is starting a true freshman quarterback on a team that was absolutely gutted by the portal. I think these two teams match up fairly evenly. I give Cal a defensive advantage, but I don't know if it'll be enough to stop Hankerson on the ground, especially considering the Beavers upgraded at quarterback from what they had a year ago, which would definitely balance out the offense a bit more. So I'm going to put my faith in Oregon State at home to get the job done, but close, 31-27. Hawaii looked pretty solid in week 0 thanks to a gritty performance from Micah Alihado, who looks like a budding star in the Mountain West. And they've got some serious playmakers on the offense around them. Stanford was by no means a quality opponent, but still a Power 5 win. Now they'll hit the road out at Arizona, who had a disastrous year a season ago. They had a solid portal haul with Ismail Mahdi, Luke Wysong, and Chris Hudson coming in to help support Noah Fafita, who needs a bounce-back year himself after throwing a ton of picks last year. I just think this Arizona team is still a bit below average on both sides of the ball this season, and as long as Alihado is healthy, Hawaii's got a chance to stay in this game late. I'm going to take Arizona to win at home, though, 30-17. Utah at UCLA could be an incredible watch in the late slate Saturday, with Devin Dampier and Nico Iamaleava making their long-awaited debuts with their new teams. Dampier was a breakout star in New Mexico last season and earned the ability to make the jump to the Power 5, and he'll be supported by one of the best offensive lines in America this season at Utah. As for Nico, he left Tennessee looking for a paycheck and found it out west, but I don't think UCLA has nearly enough talent around him to replicate his success he had at Tennessee. Nonetheless, he is a great quarterback and could find ways to put up some points for the Bears, but I think Utah has a pretty sizable edge in the trenches, and I trust their defense to travel well enough. Give me the Utes by double digits, 34-23. Our final matchup of the Saturday slate is Washington hosting Colorado State, and I am very high on Washington this season. Not as a true contender in the Big Ten, but as a team that can really compete thanks to Damon Williams and some real playmakers alongside him. Jonah Coleman and Devin Boston are two of the best players in the country at their position, and I think Damon's dual threat ability is going to make it really hard for Colorado State to make stops throughout this game. I don't see Colorado State matching the offensive production in this game whatsoever, and Washington wins by 20+. I'm going with a 41-17 final for the Huskies. South Carolina is one of the most hyped teams in the country heading into the season, thanks to the Noah Sellers, Dylan Stewart, Jelon Kilgore, Nick Harbor, and the recently eligible Razul Faison coming into the fold now. I think there's a real chance this team can compete for a playoff spot if things go right, and we'll get our first look Sunday against Virginia Tech. With Tech, I'm not nearly as high on them after a down year from Kyron Drones and some big defensive losses. I think the offense could be fine, but defensively, I can see them getting pushed around a bit in this game. The spread's only sitting around a touchdown, and I just think South Carolina has a lot more proven talent. I think they can control this game enough to cover. I've got the Gamecocks by 10, 31-21. Sunday night brings us an elite matchup with Notre Dame heading down to Miami. It's CJ Carr's debut at quarterback against Georgia transfer Carson Beck. And personally, I'd be all over Jeremiah Love in this game. I think Notre Dame knows it should be able to rely on the run game, and he'll want to kick off a Heisman campaign with a statement game here. Miami's defense was really rough a season ago, and I don't know if the additions they made were enough to change that much. CJ Carr's got a lot of ability, though, and his receiving core is great. If he plays well, I think Notre Dame can walk into Hard Rock and roll over the Canes. But I do believe enough in Carson Beck behind this offensive line to find his weapons enough and make it a hell of a game. The gap defensively is just too much for me to get over, though. I'm going with Notre Dame by a score, 30-23. Our final game of Week 1 is Monday night, TCU heading out to North Carolina to take on Bill Belichick's Tar Heels. I actually really like what Bill's building in Chapel Hill, and I think this team has a ton of depth, which can really come in handy later on. But early on, I wonder if they really know who their best guys are, and it may take some time for everything to click, considering almost the entire team is new through the portal besides some of the O-line. And I like Gio Lopez, but Josh Hoover over at TCU is a better quarterback to me and has much more trustworthy weapons. Eric McAllister is a stud, and the TCU defense should be pretty good, led by Bud Clark, who's one of the best safeties in the nation. So I favor TCU even on the road here, 34-28. That's it for my Week 1 picks. Let me know your thoughts on any of these games down below in the comments, or any ideas you have for content on the channel in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
BARK Radio.